Welcome to today's episode of Let's Get Growing. It's a Vine Dental podcast. My name is Teresa Duncan, and I am the owner of Odyssey Management and also the owner of Dental Revenue Network, which is a brand new membership aimed at billing company owners and professional billers. So they gave me a list of questions to answer so that you can get to know me better. So I'm going to go ahead and ask myself these questions, and hopefully it will give you a little bit more insight into what makes me tick. So first question is, what inspired you to pursue a career in dentistry and what keeps you passionate about it today? So that's a really interesting question because I was an accidental person in dentistry. Like coming into dentistry was completely by accident. I actually was waitlisted for medical school, two different medical schools, one in Chicago, one in Southern Virginia. And I thought I was just going to kill times before I reapplied. And I landed in an office. The doctor is amazing. Still good friends with him. Still talk to him. I actually just went in to get my clear aligners all fixed. And he was a good boss. He mentored me. He taught me a lot of stuff about dentistry, but also about business. And I started out as an assistant, and then I was also doing admin stuff. And here's the funny part. We still laugh about it. I was a terrible assistant. And so he actually was very happy when we hired another assistant. He was able to move me up front. We laugh about it because he'll say, no, you were fine. And I'll say, no, you're totally lying to me. And I know when he's lying. So I knew he was lying. I was really happy to leave the clinical side, not because I didn't like it, but because I just love the admin side a lot more. And so that really is what got me passionate, was being able to talk to the patients and being able to really go over how I could help them to afford the treatment, because we all know they need the treatment, but in their minds, they're having a hard time either justifying the cost, finding the funds for it, or just basically understanding treatment. And I was really good at that side of it. And moving me into that position as manager, care coordinator, was a win for both of us. And so that really fueled it. Now, when I started speaking and sharing, this info with other people, what really fueled me was seeing the little light go off over people's heads. Because think about insurance 15 years ago, 20 years ago. It was not as complicated, but it was still new, and it was still something that you had to wrap your arms around, right? So it was really, really gratifying to see people come out of my classes and say, okay, now I understand why I'm doing it this way. And there really wasn't a lot of people out there telling you the why behind the actions that we were taking. And so when you're able to see, like, think of yourself as a manager, when you're able to push people to do really well and you see them catch it, like you can just see the recognition in their eyes of why they're doing what they're doing, and then they have new purpose. That's what I feel when I'm talking to a crowd and I can see like these collective light bulbs going off over people's heads. And then I think also the fact that I've seen dentistry evolve. I've been in dentistry for 30 years. I've had my company for 20. And what I'm seeing now is we're really going through a huge shift in business model and payment model, all sorts of things. And I feel like I need to stay in and help out with that and help more people understand that. So that's really what fuels me staying in dentistry and working to educate so many of you. Long answer to a question. So let's go to the next question here. Can you share a memorable patient success story that showcases the impact of modern dental technologies on patient care? So I'm going to go back in time and I'm going to talk about a modern dental technology that is not as modern now, but it was huge back then. And maybe we can make some comparisons on the technology we're seeing today. So as a treatment coordinator, explaining cases, explaining treatment to people, my boss did a really good job of doing that. And then he would leave, and then, we're the ones that have to answer all of the extra questions. One thing that I learned was the x-rays that we're looking at they're not the greatest models, right? So, and this is back we did not have digital. So I was actually in practice when we were taking the pictures, we were taking the images, and we were doing the dip tank. And if you don't know what a dip tank is, that's because you're young. We were doing the dip tank, and then we were letting the x-rays dry, and then we could take a look and mount the x-rays in there. So then when we moved to digital, where we didn't have any of that, we could get rid of our processing tanks and all that. That saved so much money, but also cleared up the room, the lounge and the lab. It was wild. But being able to put the x-rays in a bigger picture up on the screen made such a huge difference when it came to talking to the patients about what they needed and how we could help them get better, really fix the things that they came in with huge pain points with. So when I am able to illustrate a problem and people are visual, so it really hit me then that technology of digital x-rays made a huge difference. And now going forward, we had intraoral images, and then nowadays everybody takes intraoral images. It's pretty much part of the workflow. I remember when I first started speaking, asking a dentist to do an intraoral image was like they were just mad. They didn't want to do it. It was clunky. The cameras were clunky. Everything was clunky. So I've seen that happen, and now we've got images that are being evaluated by computer programs, and we're seeing color and heat maps flare up on these images. So I think the one thing I would take away is that as much as technology is improving, right? The people that you're trying to talk to, the people that whose lives you're trying to change, people in general are visual. So you can explain parts per million fluoride till you're out of breath, but you have to show them visually what it is you're talking about. And I think that's the biggest takeaway that I've seen from technology. I mean, yes, we've had electronic health records. Now we can do all sorts of electronic billing, all that kind of stuff. But for me, the impact, and I watched the impact of being able to show visually what they need. That was huge. And I think it was a game changer. And it was actually right after that we started to see a ton of, giving you a little bit of a history lesson here, a ton of cosmetic dentistry. There was the cosmetic dentist age where everybody wanted to be cosmetic dentists. And then unfortunately we had this thing called a recession. But back in the day when you called yourself a cosmetic dentist, you were doing full mouth reconstruction and veneers and white crowns and all that kind of stuff. And that really was enabled because patients could finally visualize why they needed to get the work done that we've been recommending for years, right? Okay, so let me go to the next question. In your opinion, what emerging dental technology or trend excites you and the most for the future of dentistry, and why? Okay, so I know that, of course, computers evolving and all that kind of stuff, great. And I think that's amazing. But for me, because I'm an insurance nerd, for me, the technology behind getting the payers and practice management systems and clearinghouses and providers to talk to each other, I think that's really amazing. If you think about it, and again, I have this perspective because I'm older, that I've seen it where we could get on the phone with a insurance company, and you're not going to believe this, but we would call an insurance company. We would get through on the first ring, maybe second ring. I'm talking big insurance companies. And we would talk to the rep, and the rep was super friendly, and the rep would actually tell us how to do things. And, oh, you should do it this way. This is going to get the client. Very, very different way of doing things, right? Then you look at nowadays, it's hard to talk to somebody. You don't know if you're going to even get connected. But that is not really the point of it, because the reason we're calling is to get information, right? So I think, to me, the biggest exciting technology that's coming is the fact that now the carriers have these programs. I don't want to get too technical, but basically they're talking to each other through these data programs. And so if they have a lot of information on their portal, we can now see and maybe even download it into our software. So we're getting information faster, and we're getting more information. Now, I know some of you are thinking, but we're not getting everything. I know, we're getting there, but sometimes it's not all available, right? But what we're getting is a lot more than what we used to get. And I think that we are really just, unfortunately, we're looking in so many different places to get all of this. And I do know in the future, we're going to be in a situation where we can go to maybe 2 sites, 3 sites at the most, and everything that we're going to need is going to be available to us. And that's what you've been asking for. That's what I've been asking for. So for me, the technology, I mean, yes, it's nice to see shiny objects in the office and all that kind of stuff. Same day crowns, great. Printing your own crowns, pretty amazing. But the nerd in me is saying, let me just type into the insurance company website and download everything I want for this patient's plan. And that's going to be here sooner than later. So that gets me pretty unreasonably excited, actually. Okay. How do you approach educating and empowering patients and offices to take control of their health outside of the clinic? So when I first looked at this question, I thought, well, is it my job to educate everybody about health. I'm kind of in the insurance field. I'm in the revenue cycle management field. And after some clarification, it was told to me that this is a much bigger question than I think even they realize. So here, let's go from there. How do we take care of our health? So right now we've got a lot of billers and managers who are burning out. Okay. I'm not really going to talk about the clinical team members. They have issues as well as far as, job satisfaction. I'm just going to talk to my people right now who are the billers, admins, managers. Okay. We have a lot of stress. Not only are we dealing with sometimes contentious insurance carriers, we're also dealing with patients who are just unhappy. And I think all of us can agree it's a little bit, some of them are meaner. And I ask in all my classes, do you think since COVID it's changed? Yes, absolutely. That's the universal response. Like people just in general, maybe not in our offices, just people in general are just not as nice as they used to be. Okay, fine. So now we have to deal with that. But that takes a toll on people like you and me who are used to not just handling their own business, but making sure that everybody around them is handled. That's the nature of the office manager, of the leader of a practice, is that if someone is not excelling, we take on that burden. How do we help them to excel? And that's a lot of stress for a lot of you. Whenever I get a unsubscribe on my email list, I'm always like, why did they unsubscribe? And a lot of times it's that they're tired of listening to me, whatever. But often I will get somebody who says, I'm retiring, I'm leaving dentistry, I can't do it anymore. And that is really hard. I'll usually send an email that says, congratulations, I wish you all the best. And then we'll have this back and forth. And really what I'm getting from my former colleagues is that it's tough to deal with the way business is run nowadays. And so that's why I want you all to take care of yourselves. I want you to find solutions that are going to make things easier. There's no reason we should be on the phone with anyone the majority of our day. We're not a call center. We're an oral care center, right? We're billers. We're managers. We shouldn't be tied to our headset. So I want you to make sure that you carve out time for yourself. That pile of papers is going to be there on Monday. That email is not going to disappear overnight. Leave it alone. If you're done at the end of the day, then you're done. And then on the way home, this is my problem. So I'm going to ask you to try to do what I really had a hard time doing, but eventually was able to. On the ride home, I would go over everything that I did that day that I should have done differently. And then I would say, oh man, I meant to do this. And so really the drive home was just me beating myself up for things I didn't do or I could have done better. Think about that. Think of how unhealthy that is. So I'm just going to ask you to give yourself grace and take care of yourself because you're the practice leader. They look to you, right? They don't, not only that, but you've got family and friends that need you to be the best version of yourself. And it's hard to do that when you're completely stressed out. So that would be my advice there. All right, let me go to the last question here. If you could give one piece of advice to fellow dentists and dental professionals to grow their practice, what would it be? Respect each other. I know that sounds really like kumbaya kind of thing, but if you work together and you're working together closely, you have to have a level of respect for each other. Now, here's something that you're not going to expect me to say. You don't have to always like each other. I've worked with a ton of people I didn't really like, but I respected them. They did a good job. But would I have gone, grab a beer with them or Diet Coke with them? No, probably not. In fact, I would have been like, oh man, how can I avoid it? But they did a good job and I respected it. And I was always very courteous to them. So you don't have to love everyone that you work with, but you do have to treat them well. And I think a lot of people in smaller offices, that's hard to grasp. And that's what I would ask you to do is just treat each other with respect. I would ask you to hire really good people and don't be so quick to hire. I see this all the time. We hire people because we feel like, oh my gosh, we're short staffed and all of that. You know what? Think about it this way. If that person didn't come into work, you're still short staffed. What can you do about it? I would rather you operate short staffed and find somebody really, really competent and really fits in with your practice. I think the last piece of advice I would give you is to remember that there's more going on in dentistry than inside your office. And that's a mistake a lot of clinicians make because let's face it, they're drilling, they're, got the loops on all day. They've got other things to do. However, in our industry, you can't ignore compliance. You can't ignore rules and regulations. And I do see this happening more and more where the actual business side of dentistry, all of the paperwork, even if it's electronically, it's still paperwork. All of the paperwork is super important and can't be ignored anymore. And I worry that we're kind of seeing all this compliance as optional rather than mandatory like it is in most cases. So I would say just make sure that you're keeping up on what is required to run a practice. And they asked for one piece of advice, but I can't, it's hard for me to do that. So that would be the one main thing, but then going down to your team, respect each other, make it a good, fun place to work, and give yourself grace all the time, because it's hard to do our job. It's hard to keep up with everything. That's why, I created the membership, because some of you just cannot keep up with everything. I get it. I mean, this is like my full-time job is to keep up with all this stuff, and I'm always running. So I get it. So in closing, all the questions are done, but in closing, it's a really hard job to be an insurance coordinator, to be a dental manager, but we do hard things. That's what we do, right? So again, my name is Teresa Duncan, owner of Odyssey Management and also the Dental Revenue Network. And you can find both of those sites on my website, odysseymgmt.com, dentalrevenuenetwork.com if you're a more advanced biller. So it's a little bit aimed more towards people who have been doing this for quite a while. And I'm hoping that you will join me. It looks like on June 17th, I'm coming back to Vine, and we're going to do a mid-year check-in. So that is going to be in your email inbox. So I hope that you join me for that. And then I'm hoping to see you on the road. We've got a couple events planned. I'm going to hook up with Vine a couple times on the road. So keep your eyes and ears open for that. And thank you so much for listening to me.